Aquaman is a 2018 DC Comics movie starring Jason Momoa as Aquaman. And it's amazing how bad the DCEU movies have been to this point that even the most mediocre of films look like Citizen Kane in comparison. Aquaman has a hard mission statement. It has to fix kind of the problems with the DCEU up to this point, also while blazing its own path towards an actual story. And it does this relatively well, but the end result is kind of one part original Thor and one part Black Panther. And Momoa is good as Aquaman, but the DCEU has so many issues that this is just a capable film, but it looks amazing. I do want to see this character in other films, but I feel like they really had to knock it out of the park with this film, and they didn't. It was just okay with me. The Grissom Gang is a 1971 crime movie where an elite socialite is abducted by some mob members, and through this ordeal, one of the mob guys and the elite socialite woman fall in love. And this movie is surprisingly violent for being 1971. I always love when people say, I wish they made movies like the good old days. This was the early 70s, and it's bloodier than a lot of movies that come out today. The first half of this movie is very slow and deliberately paced and kind of just hanging out with these characters. It kind of feels like a Tarantino film where you're just hanging out with these people. And that part was kind of tedious, but it picks up a lot in its last act. The last hour, 45 minutes of this thing kind of fly by because that's where all the action is. The action's backloaded. So you get a lot of the chases and gunfire that you expect from these crime movies, but it's all in the back half of the film. And I don't know if they rendered the relationship between these two characters well enough for me to root for them to end up together. There's something weird about it where he always feels like he's forcing the relationship and she's kind of on the receiving end, but I think we're supposed to be rooting for them. But the ending of this film is really interesting because it doesn't end in a way that you think it would end. There's a conflict between the girl and her father that pops up in the last maybe 10 minutes of this movie. That's really interesting, and I wish they dove into that a little bit more. But it's a pretty well-rendered crime drama once you get through the first act or so. I thought it was fine. I was entertained. The Revenant is a 2015 Academy Award-winning movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy. For those of you who might have missed the boat on this, DiCaprio plays a leader of a group of men who went hunting in the present-day Dakotas. And as the film begins, DiCaprio's character has somewhat lost the faith of the men he's leading through the Dakotas. And the leader of the group that has lost faith is Tom Hardy's character, who just want to go their own way, and there's already conflict in the group as we meet them. And the conflict comes to a head when DiCaprio's character is mauled by a bear. DiCaprio's character is then left by most of the men and left to fend for himself out in the wilderness. And in school they teach you all of the conflicts, man versus God, man versus himself, man versus nature, and this movie has all of them. This is a dark, brooding, and violent film which tests all of the characters throughout its entire running time. And with the film using a lot of long shots, it also tests the actors. And in a way, it kind of tests the viewer. What would you do if you were in the same situation? All of the characters make decisions that seem like they're halfway reasonable, if ill-intended. And Tom Hardy is such a good bad guy in this movie. He's a bad guy you can root for, in a way. This movie has some straight-up beautiful shots in it. Just scenery is gorgeous. And the way it's shot with the characters, with the camera moving in and out of trees, it's just beautiful to look at. And harrowing for the characters. You get a sense of accomplishment as the film goes through its paces. This is a great flick. I'm not the first one to say this, and I won't be the last. And it obviously deserves all the accolades that it got. I know that I said earlier in this series that I don't like Westerns. Turns out I like some Westerns.